Okay, welcome everyone. This is JCK on Quantum Truths JCK. I'm actually really excited and honoured to have a dear friend of mine finally on my channel. And this is Rachel Vaughan. And Rachel Vaughan has been a dear friend of mine for about 12, 13 years. We were trying to work out what year we met. And I'm very honoured to know this amazing woman who is now a whistleblower, I guess you could call her, for satanic ritual abuse. And so we're talking about 12, 13 years. Rachel and I have been talking about all of the truth of the things that are now being revealed publicly. So I was very aware of these things before Rachel and I spoke, and or before, you know, I had a channel, and now she's finally it's the right time, and it's the right time to talk about this. And I just wanted to invite you on the show, Rachel, because you have an amazing story, knowledge, background, and I really felt this was the time this year to really bring to light to a wider audience what's happening and what has happened in for many decades to the children of the world. And as a survivor yourself and a victor, coming through all of that. And I wanted you to tell your story, and to also just to bring it to light, and that it's not just stories, that it's a reality. So thank you so much for coming on, Rachel. Love you so much. So
thank you, JC. Thank you. It's an honour. It's an honour. It really is. And I've just been so overjoyed to watch your beautiful rise. It's been fantastic. I did really want to speak with you. So the timing is perfect, because obviously, you know, with the MK Ultra stuff, and it wasn't just that I was abused or used as a honeypot in the tunnels in Edwardstown in South Australia, but it was also MK Ultra abuses, mind control, hypnosis. There was a lot of other stuff going on, and my family line was chosen for that because there's actually psychic ability on both sides of the family. So a lot of people don't realise that with the MK Ultra, the mind control techniques, that the people that are doing these studies are absolutely fascinated with psychic ability in humans, and they want to control it. And a lot of what we're seeing at the moment, the last couple of years, there's a big push to swamp it and squash it and prevent it from being mainstream or being elevated. And obviously in Western society, you know, the psychic ability factor, you know, the amazing work that you're doing, JC, that you're giving so many people so much hope at a time that is probably one of the darkest times in human history, especially for the number of people that are going through the negativity. You know, this is worldwide. There's a huge number of people on the earth at the moment. This is crucial that there are people like yourself giving people hope. And I've got to say, I tune in regularly for that hope. There's some YouTubers I can't watch now because they seem to have lost the narrative. They seem to have lost that hope. So, you know, it's very important for me to speak to someone like you with the work that you do, because the MK Ultra mind control that I was subjected to had a lot to do with the psychic ability in my family. And for some reason, I was particularly subjected to that particular form of the abuse and the control. They wanted to harness that ability or abuse it or squash it out of me. I don't know, something along those lines. So, and it's really interesting with relation to the tunnels, you know, there's been so many cases where children have been abused, you know, whether it's MK Ultra, whether it's honeypots, and honeypots when, you know, you get a small child and you place them with an adult and you make them do sexual things, whether or not the adult is awake or in a trance or drugged, and then film it or photograph it, and then you have that adult blackmailed for the rest of their life, and controllable, obviously. And this has clearly been happening through, you know, the Epstein case is a perfect example. And I went on to Sean Atwood's channel to talk about my father, because he was doing pretty much, I describe my father as Australia's Epstein, because what he was doing was extensive, and I was the tool. I was used for that. And the tunnels were basically in Edwardstown led to a series of bunkers. They were old Wunderlich's terracotta tile kilns, and they were converted to bunkers in the 38 mandates. So between 1941 and 1943, there was a thesis written that between 41 and 43, there was like 547 documented bunkers, but the ones in Edwardstown weren't documented. So there's a PhD that was written on it by a guy called Martin Wimmer, which is fantastic. It's called Gimme Shelter. Yeah. And yeah, so I sadly, even though I've corresponded with Martin, and he agreed that what I described to him was very similar to what he had found in the area, but he didn't know about the specific ones that I was pointing out in Edwardstown. And I've done so much research to prove those tunnels exist now. And just like with the McMartin preschool case over in America, you know, when children are abused in a location that doesn't exist, their allegations are ignored. It's very easy to ignore them. So you've got this is why the tunnels exist, so that they can keep it all underground. It can't possibly be real. The children are crazy, or any survivors are crazy because the tunnels aren't there. Now, it's very easy to keep the tunnel secret too, because when you've got a series of people that own the bunkers and only have access to those tunnels themselves, they're not going to share that information. It implicates them as well, because of course their names are on the property titles. So it's not like they're going to just go around and share all that information. Yeah, but as we saw in the McMartin preschool case, the tunnels were found.
Yes.
So, you know, that you've got Hugh Hefner's mansion, the tunnels are there. I've been seeing stuff about, you know, there may be, well, apparently it's well known that there are tunnels under the White House. And I was seeing some stuff, you know, just recently about perhaps that's why the military are in there as well. Yeah. To have a look underneath. I really, really hope that's what's happening.
That's been the
hope and pray.
And why it's been fenced off, part of why, you know, DC has been fenced off. Yeah. Hope and pray that that's true. If I interrupt just very briefly, that very first video I did was about investigating the underground tunnels. I wanted to have a look because my previous admin had mapped out all of these the earthquakes that were being reported around Australia, and he had mapped out, and it was all exactly 10 kilometres under, 10 kilometres under, 10 kilometres under, and it formed this tunnel system. Okay, he and some other people were doing it, and so I was like, I want to know what's really going on under there. And I had in the back of my mind the stories that you had told me that there were tunnels. So that was the motivating factor for that first video I did. And what I saw was I didn't expect to see what I saw. I expected to see children in cages, labs, you know, sort of like my lab type stuff. So what I want to sort of ask you, I guess, I mean, I'm kind of jumping the gun here because we haven't really done a proper intro to your family, etc. But why is Australia one of the prime places for this extensive network? What do you think is going on here? Or do you think this is just widespread and this is everywhere and everyone's got the same amount of extensive sort of networks of tunnels underneath, underground? If
we look at it from a symbolic point of view, I'd say the land down under, you know, there's a reason why we call it that. So I think it's a specific hub for certain activities. Also, the lower number of, you know, our population is smaller than most other countries with a space this large. So we're sort of, there's not as many of us to report on it. And we're easier to control. I would say the way that we were colonised would have a lot to do with it, the enormous amount of control. Being a Western country, faith is not something that people are really allowed to have. We're very Western, so scientifically structured. Psychology is God. Psychology is the religion. So we're so dampened down. We're not allowed to speak about psychic ability. We'll get denigrated. We're not allowed to speak about, you know, seeing things that are otherworldly because we'll get locked up. So I think it's the control factor. It makes it very easy to control the population here. And I think that the people who founded this place, and I know from the research that I've done, the people who founded the area came from a Freemason stock. Yes. So, and my particular state, South Australia, we weren't convicts, but we were Freemason stock. So, and Rosicrucian particularly. I mean, even when they first started to populate South Australia, they started in Victor Harbour, and the landmarks in that area. You know, you've got the Rosetta Stone, which is the bluff in Victor Harbour, but they called it after the Rosetta Stone. You've got Lake Alexandrina. In fact, Alexandrina, the area, is going to be a smart city. They've already planned that out. So, you know, it's a special place for them, very special place for them. So I think it's the symbology. I think it's the people who settled the place. I think it was planned out. And sadly, I think it's because brown-skinned people have a higher rate of a particular endocrine drug. And, you know, the decimation of the population here has been absolutely horrific of our native people.
Yeah.
I mean, and if people don't believe that people here, I mean, the original people here in South Australia were treated like game. Yeah. And this is not just at colonial stage or the overtaking or invasion. If you look at articles like the Guardian article called The Room of the Dead, it describes very high up people like Professor Cleland, who collected the Aboriginal bones of people. They waited for them to die. Perhaps they didn't wait for them to die. In fact, in instances, there are at least 6 people in this room. The Room of the Dead is a series of skeletal remains that are at the museum, and they were collected. They were collectibles. 6 of them have bullet holes. So these people were game. They were game to these sick colonists. Professor Cleland was involved. There was a former coroner who was involved. I can't remember his surname. I should look the article up before I mentioned it. That particular former coroner, this is a long time ago, I think it was 1936 when he passed, and it was found that he had over 100 skulls in his collection. His personal, private, human collection of skulls. So, you know, for people who don't believe in that stuff, please check out the article. It's very much an eye-opener. And the Aboriginal people were terrified of going into institutions because they knew what was happening. They tried to abscond, and they would be chased down and dragged back. It's just, so I think there's several reasons.
And this was part of the remote view I did of Woomera and Pine Gap, what was really going on underneath, which I didn't, I'm getting shivers. I didn't clearly mention in that particular video that when I did remote view the military, that they were under a trance. So whoever was working in those lower levels of those places, they did not know what they were doing. They were actually, it was almost like a technology that it got switched on. And then, so there's so much stuff. I mean, this is so layered, and we could talk about what's happening in the 3D world, and we could talk about why would they go for Indigenous people. I felt the same thing about South Africa and Zimbabwe, in those regions with the colonisation, etc., what they were doing to darker skinned people there. I mean, all of that is like you said, they might have a higher adrenochrome production. Is that what you were saying? Now, I can remember an article, I just want to say this briefly. I can remember an article about the Queen, and I just think this is hidden in plain sight. There was this quaint little article about Queen Elizabeth, about what she has for breakfast. And they mentioned in it that the Queen prefers her brown eggs over the white eggs because they are tastier. And it's stuck in my head. And when more information sort of came to light about Queen Elizabeth, I just thought that was, that's basically, what is that saying? We know about her, what happened in Canada when her and Prince Philip went there, and all those native children went missing on that picnic. And this just goes back to those horrific stories that we know of what has been happening on this planet for thousands of years, and the enslavement of the people. But I wanted to talk about your experience, and people will make the connections anyway to all these other things. Because when we get more people coming forward and making these sorts of stories public, we start to piece the things together to try to understand just the extent of the control we've been under, and so that we can undo the trauma. Okay, because we can't undo trauma collectively until we know exactly what's been happening to us to our people and to and who was our enemy. It's the whole concept of know your enemy. Okay.
Yes.
So that's mainly why I wanted you on, because I wanted you have such a powerful, incredible story. And so we will can we start first, because you've got so much information, we might have to do another interview, but can you start first just to explain, maybe just talk about your family and what you remember of the roles that people played, etc., and then just go for it. Go tell me your story. Yeah.
All right. So I hail from the McIntyre family, and our family line, we have Kennedys, we have quite a an interesting family. Wrights. My great grandfather, Joseph Wright, was very, very high up in the Freemasons, and that's my paternal great grandfather. I was predominantly abused by my father, who was a Rosicrucian member of the Golden Dawn sect and a Freemason. As far as the Golden Dawn sect is concerned, that was Aleister Crowley's group. My father actually called himself the Great Beast, but he adored Crowley and his tenets. And that was pretty much how my father saw life. Do what you want. If it feels good, do it. That's how he operated. And that was he definitely had dissociative disorders. There would be different personalities that would come out, and you could see the shift. So for those that don't believe in otherworldly entities that take over and possess people, you might just want to look at the fact that, like that photograph I showed to you, my father could be quite normal at times, then something would trigger him, and it would be like a dark cloud would come over him. Now, I'm not saying I saw a dark cloud come over him and possess his body. He would just shift into a completely different personality. His facial features, his voice would change, and he would become very, very dark, very cruel immediately. It was just instantaneous. As part of his obsession with Crowley, he learnt hypnosis. Now, another one of my abusers also studied hypnosis under one of Fiona Barnett's abusers, her main MK Ultra. And this abuser of mine also studied under the same woman. And I've got proof of that. I know that she studied there. She did tell me she studied there years and years and years ago, but I've found, through the alumni, former alumni, found that
they infiltrated the psychiatry sort of faculty.
Absolutely.
For that and like you said, Australia is so heavily science-based, where we have a lot of scientific innovations, and these institutes are held up as like these amazing, they're just held up as
exactly.
Yes,
like Western medicine, which Western medicine is just a backup. I'm not saying it's about all doctors. I think there's some beautiful doctors out there, but a lot of it is a backup for the pharmaceutical industry, and we are subjects to be prodded and poked and tested on and prescribed to.
Yeah.
So getting back to my father, so he was quite gifted. He was a very, very, very intelligent man. So he could do anything. He could weld. He could build. He was a deep sea diver. He had a lot of friends, a ridiculous number of friends. Most of them were creepy, and I can't really cast my mind back to many that I actually thought were nice. They were all creepy. I shouldn't say all, because some of them are going to think, oh, I'm not like that. But look, the ones that I was introduced to, I didn't like. Many of them abused me. So he had the ability to hypnotize people. He was into this blackmail scheme. I wasn't the only child of his that he was using for that. My family has connections in politics, in media, and it's, a lot of incest going on, an awful lot of incest, not just with my father. Incest was everywhere. And another reason why I think our family line was chosen for the MK Ultra program wasn't just because my father was easily manipulated, because obviously he was owned because he was doing these horrific things. It's because we had a military background on both sides of the family as well. And there was some question about my maternal grandfather, whether or not he actually saw active service. He said that he had. He'd said he'd been in the Coral War, but family members doubted that. I tried to apply through Veterans Affairs for his documentation, and they wouldn't give it to me. They said it had to go to his widow. So that was an acknowledgement that they had it existed. So he did see active service. He was subjected to electroshock treatment. My other grandfather on the paternal side survived 2 wars. One, he was a rat of Tobruk and survived the Kokoda Trail. So when you have intergenerational abuse and trauma through things like military service, it seems to go down. I don't know how, but obviously if the MK Ultra scientists are fascinated with it, they must go through the DNA, or perhaps it's perpetrated in behaviours with children and then grandchildren.
You know, that military connection seems to be, I mean, if you know of what happened in, there's a book written by Vaughan about weird scenes inside the canyon, about Laurel Canyon and all the connections there to in the music industry, and how most of the famous musicians from the 60s, that, you know, the hippie generation, all their families were military, all that you could trace military. And this goes back, I mean, you check any celebrity or musician who has had an unusual demise or some kind of strange thing where you're thinking, have they MK Ultra'd? There's always a military connection. And then that goes back to something that I heard that Sacha Stone had said about, that he said that in the military that they sign, basically, you're basically signing over permission for that the military own not just the soldier, okay, not just the person signing up, but their spouse, their children, and every generation to come. So
oh my God,
they actually own them. So
we're not just talking birth certificates and straw men, we're talking about something else entirely. My God.
So they're basically owning, so this is basically how it would work. And that all makes sense, because then you're thinking, why are these people being targeted? Why are they, you know, and how many people can connect military in their family and say, oh yeah, my grandfather was, you know, So they would have signed a contract to say that generationally that they could be taken and experimented on. And that a huge part of that would be the MK Ultra and the many, because it's not just called MK Ultra, there would have been many chapters of that, correct?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And our family line was also, you know, subjected to the medical experimentation.
Yeah. That's become very.
And my grandfather on my mother's side, obviously, he got a lot of it. And I was medically experimented on. The other family members have come forward to me and said they were medically experimented on as well. So it's not just, you know, the stuff that I've divulged in other interviews. There was also, you know, student doctors needing to learn how to catheterize a child through the urethra. So I was subjected to that, you know, and so, you know, that on top of the sexual abuse I suffered from very early age, it's a wonder I can even go, you know, and I've had to have procedures done, and, you know, it's just, you're just a lump of meat to be practiced upon. And that's sort of, you know, that's a segue to that particular area that we were wanting to talk about with the butcher that I mentioned in my ITNDA testimony. There was a property next door where I was taken as a child, and that's where I was catheterized. These people were practicing on me. It was one of the first memories that came up in 2006. So, and I wrote to Ted Mulligan of the Mulligan Inquiry about that. Now, that was the terms of reference for that inquiry really didn't include familial abuse. It was mostly institutional abuse. So unfortunately, there wasn't really much that Ted could do for me or my sibling, who was also making allegations through that inquiry. But I learned a great deal from sort of interacting and then reading on about the inquiry afterwards. And the inquiry did cover the children that I believe my father was involved with disposing of or torturing and murdering, who went missing from the Glandore Boys' Home. Now, this particular property is just up the road. It's actually in between where I grew up in Edwardstown and the Glandore Boys' Home. So now I don't know if I doubt that the owners of that particular butcher, it's not a butcher anymore. I doubt that they're the same owners. The abuses and the things that I saw there and next door and behind were in the 70s and 80s. But it's interesting, the property behind it has sold not that long ago, and you can see there's like a trap door in the real estate photographs, it's quite obvious that there's something underneath. Just outside, and this is another thing, there's commissary tunnels all over Adelaide. So they're the Telstra tunnels. Used to be Telecom, now Telstra. And you can see them on most main streets. They've got metal plates over them, rectangular metal plates, and usually in a system of 2 or 4, sometimes 6. There are pits underneath there, but they're actually tunnels, but they can be closed off in some sections, and some sections aren't. They're open and you can just keep walking through them. Those tunnels are everywhere. Now, for some reason in Edwardstown and Glandore, they're not on the main streets, just on the main streets. They're also on the side streets, which is very, very unusual. I've not found that anywhere else except for in some country locations. So there is a tunnel system going down beside the property I've just mentioned that used to be a butcher and the bakery behind, leading straight to the Glandore Boys' Home.
Yeah.
So
did you want to talk?
And
about
I went into
the butcher? Did you want to talk about the butcher? Because you said, I don't know if it was you that mentioned about the symbol, and not necessarily that one, but just in general. Yeah.
So when I was a child, I don't remember it being a painted symbol on the outside of the property. I just remember my father pointing to the window of the property and sniggering about how you could get your special meat there. And I won't go too much into it, but people can easily make a correlation between what sort of meat is special. Now, I don't remember this symbol being there. I later learned what the symbol meant, but that symbol is being used now. It hasn't changed. It's the same symbol, and it's a royalty, a symbol of royalty. And it's used many different places, many different businesses, and it's a signal that there is something special there that you can buy.
Is it a crown, or is it more than that? Is it like
a particular kind of crown?
Right.
Has a certain number of prongs.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you look at the Freemason numbers that are so important.
I was going to say.
Yeah.
Is there a shield, 33. Is there a shield underneath, or is there a shield?
No, just the crown.
And no keys or anything like that underneath. No. Okay.
No. And I really, really hope that the people who own that property now have no knowledge of it, and I really hope they're innocent. And I really don't want any negative consequences for them, because I'm talking about 70s and 80s. I'm talking about location. I'm not talking about them being. And a lot of businesses carry on symbols. Yeah. But it's disturbing that that's still being used.
Yeah. And wow, where can I go here? I remember years ago you told me that your father was known as a cutter. Yeah. So can you explain what that is?
Yeah. Okay, so I revealed this in my RT&J testimony too, and I'm not the only person in my family who's had this treatment. So I've since learned that this is something that's a Freemason thing. Okay, so I think you might be referring to I'm just gonna spit it out because there's no other way of putting it, the knife up the bum treatment. Oh. So there is a particular ritual
they did that with Gaddafi.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's how they got rid of him. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I've since learned, because people send me information all the time, that this is not just a Freemason thing. It's supposedly an opening up for psychic ability. These sick people think that if they stick a sharp object, a knife, up into the rectal cavity of a small child, usually under the age of 3, I was 2.5 when it happened to me, they'll open up their psychic ability. But seriously, this is how sick these people are. Children are psychic regardless, because I won't go into it, but most children have some sort of psychic ability. That's why they see monsters under the bed. That's why they perceive things that other people don't see. That they have that ability when they're very small. I'm not really sure why, but it's certainly something that I believe very strongly. So there's no need to do that. What I think it actually does is cause chronic reversed polarity, where the chakras, and people who don't believe in chakras, you just need to go to Ayurvedic texts and look into Hinduism.
I believe in chakras, yeah. I believe
you know,
but
they exist. You know, it's impossible for people in the Western society to say, oh no, they don't exist. They do. And chronic reversed polarity is when the base chakra and the crown chakra reverse.
Yes.
And then you can have all manner of health problems. You can have very intense sexual addictions. So a lot of people who are abused in this way end up with this chronic reverse polarity. And I think that's the purpose. It's like cutting the head off the snake of the Kundalini, and it reverses it around. So that was done to me at an early age. And usually what follows on is a rape afterwards. Yeah. So through that cavity. And so, I shared that in my ITNJ testimony. I'm not the only one in my family who suffered that procedure. Since that came out, so many people have come forward to say that they had the same treatment in Adelaide. So that's a big thing. Mm-hmm. With reference to what you might have also meant with the cutting, not to be too graphic, but some people aren't happy with the orifices that are already available in the body. And my father was one. Okay. And so some of his victims suffered that.
You don't need to go into detail of that. Do you, what do you perceive, because this is a small part, even though it's huge, of a very large system. And many people think it's just evil people, but in my experience, I'm seeing it more and more and more. There's something else otherworldly that is influencing this and influencing these people and teaching these people these horrible techniques and the most depraved acts, and they're working through people. And you did show me that photograph of your father, and I couldn't look at it. To me, I saw, I saw demonic, but I saw reptilian demonic kind of thing.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. But so I wanted to know, because of what I saw underground when I remote viewed it, I actually saw demons. I've spoken to other SRA survivors who've come to me, and they've backed me up and said they've seen them when they were in the tunnels, when they were underground, and that they've had them talk to them and etc. and things like that. So what have you heard about that, and what have you heard other people say about these entities? Is it just a figment of our imagination? Is it just MK Ultra imagery that they've just put in, or is it are they physical? Is it real? What have you seen or heard of?
Now, I saw things that I cannot explain to other people because they would not believe it. But I have to be so very careful, because I'm carrying the experiences of these dead children that I saw murdered. So I have to maintain some form of, credibility for them, which has held me back in many ways, because, it's very difficult to have a career or to move on in any way. I'm being held I'm trapped. I'm in a holding pattern until this is all investigated and brought out. So it's extremely frustrating. I can tell you that my father spoke about entities that he interacted with. I can tell you that there were times when I wondered if what I was seeing was real or a puppet, something that someone had created to convince me that it was something real. Yeah. And with the puppetry factor, I've another family member who told me my father used to use, he had sophisticated equipment. So he used to use projectors and things like that to project images of things around the place to make people think that he was able to conjure things up. Mm-hmm. But in my child's mind, and I'm just saying this for people who might want to try and discredit me, in my child's mind, it was real.
Yeah.
Okay, so he used a kind of terrorization technique, a traumatization technique that would convince me and others that he had an otherworldly ability to evoke and conjure up otherworldly beings. Mm-hmm. When you have that sort of, let's just call it sorcery, when you have that, you can control people. Yeah. He had perfect immunity from prosecution. Nobody was going to touch him. It wasn't until I went to an MP who was actually courageous enough to help me, which was amazing, that he even got investigated, and then he died. And I do wonder whether or not he got the pillow treatment or whatever. He was already in an old folks home at that time. Yeah. So, JC, when I hear you talking about the things that you've seen, it rings true.
Right.
It rings true.
And
Okay.
have you heard of other victims speak of physical entities?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I've always had a bit of a thing, because I do a form of counselling for my job, and I've often wondered if schizophrenia was actually some sort of attachment or attack, because it uses what these people describe is something that speaks to them. They hear it. Now, it seems that to be the audible channels that, if these things exist, utilize. Okay, so I don't believe that schizophrenia is a proper psychiatric diagnosis. In my mind, because of my experiences and because of the ritual abuse that I suffered, I see it more as possibly a form of attachment of something that's not physical. Yeah. And, you know, the old adage that the devil made me do it, you know, people often speak about it. You know, it's not an excuse, but it's like, well, something took over.
Yeah.
I heard voices, you know, and then they do these horrific acts.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Psychically, I see it as, and I spoke about this in my last live that I did, that somebody asked about schizophrenia, and I said, I'm going to only speak about it metaphysically and not scientifically. But the way I see it is like in the aura, especially around the brain, it feels like there's an actual split there, there's been something's interfered with the energy around the head, and that it's allowing other dimensions to come through and infiltrate and affect. Because a lot of schizophrenics, because I had a friend who was a psychiatric nurse, and she would say to me that all the schizophrenics that would come through, they were so psychic, that they would hear things talking to them and saying, you know, talking about people around the room. And she said she would sort of go, how did they know about that about me? It was like something was talking to them about that. So, yeah.
So that's a way to demonize and dehumanize people who have psychic ability and who pick up on these things.
Yeah.
Call them a schizophrenic, and you put them away, or you put them on antipsychotic drugs.
Or we say it's a psychosis or it's whatever. And that's, you know, it's all part of that.
Yeah.
So
whereas in other countries, in Eastern countries, that sort of ability can become a career.
Yeah.
People can pick up on those things. You know, they might get help to control it, and then they can move on and use it and make it a positive. Whereas here in Western countries, in Australia, you daren't even speak about it.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I don't hear voices. That's not something that I've ever had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bit different than your own inner voice, which is
absolutely
slightly different than hearing other voices. But, you know, I mean, I'm part of the reason why I think, you know, I really wanted to have you on is because I wanted people to see that also that SRA survivors, because people ask me about what about the children in the tunnels, what's going to happen to them? They're so traumatized by the knowledge that this has happened, it's only just come to light, that it's becoming more and more widestream understanding that this has happened. We're dealing with that trauma of understanding this. And now a lot of people are just grieving these millions of children around the world that have been sacrificed and worked on and harmed and rescued or died or whatever in these tunnels. So I wanted people to sort of see you and see that through this horrible generational abuse and trauma and torture, that you can come out the other end and be a whole intelligent, you know, humorous, funny, beautiful, loving human being. So just in you know, being here and being a voice, I know that you're going to be, you know, that it's traumatic for you to tell the story, and I'm very aware of the time. I don't want you to talk too much. I don't want you to go on for too long talking about it, but I want you to sort of talk about what happens at the other end. How do we get out of this? What can we, can these people survive? Can they move forward, etc.?
Yep. So, I mean, a huge part of surviving is acknowledgement. So the fact that we've had 4 years where this has actually all come out to the surface, people are finally able to speak about it. That's massive. You know, otherwise people are constantly, you know, when you're a survivor, and because of the otherworldly elements involved with SRA, you can't speak about it. It's terrifying. So now finally people can speak about it. So now that you know, and their family members and their friends might not be able to handle it, but there'll be people like me and people like you and people all over the world now who say, I believe you.
Yeah.
That's massive. That's massive. Of course, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. There's always a way out. So I was talking to a group of people just recently, and someone asked me, you know, how have you survived and remained so sane? And my answer was, I was born in the Chinese year of the ox, and I'm extremely stubborn, and I will not allow anybody to have it over on me. I had that as a child. As an adult, that will never happen. So it took a long time. It took from 2006 until 2018 to finally find my voice to put it out there publicly. So, you know, for those who are watching who are still, you know, too full of fear or concern of how people will perceive them, there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly normal and human. I was just so incredibly stubborn that I decided that I was just going to go and do it anyway. I didn't really care what the perception was, and I'd already lost a lot of family at that point, so it wasn't like it was going to be a loss. I'd lost everything already, and honestly, the catharsis of getting out there and speaking up has been massive. I've not been sued. I've had threats, but the more I speak out, the more I realise I am becoming more and more powerful. I've got a whole group of trolls that spend an enormous amount of their time and energy denigrating me, and I realise it used to make me upset, but I now look at it and think, my God, how powerful am I that they have to do that? And no doubt you'll get some more trolls today, and I'll get some more trolls.
Oh yeah, love that. Bring them on, come on.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, they're trying so hard, and it used to upset me. It doesn't anymore. I feel so empowered by it. It's fantastic. Yeah, so try and turn, you know, for those watching who are survivors, who want to speak out but don't know how and are frightened to do so, the more you do it, the further you go, the more you realise you're actually the one who's now in control, that they are the ones who are afraid. You have everything on them. And I do. I mean, I have a lot of evidence. Until I get the right police officer to take the evidence and to take it to court, I won't be able to get the hard, you know, allegations and convictions put down. But the evidence is there, and I don't really need the convictions. I know that what I'm telling is the truth. I have corroborating family members. Yeah.
What about people like Senator Heffernan, who was trying to expose the paedophilia rings within higher up circles? Can you approach someone like that, or is it just still going to just be blocked everywhere you go?
I think it's about to unlock.
Yeah.
I think it's about to unlock. So in South Australia, the Child Protection Minister is now under fire because she's not been acting. There's 5 state wards who are pregnant. I mean, this is the tip of the iceberg, that these state wards are pregnant. It's just a tiny fraction. I'm not diminishing their suffering, God no. Yeah. But this is a tiny fraction of what's going on. There's a whole child pedophile ring going on. Not just the one that's still operating in Edwardstown. I know it's still operating, and the police are ignoring it. Or they're probably part of it. I know, you know, there was a chief inspector of police who I was being abused by as a child. And he's been incarcerated for somebody else's abuse, but not mine. So he's already convicted, but the police won't go after him. So, you know, there's already this limelight on the child trafficking in South Australia. It's big. So yes, Rachel Sanderson, the Member of Parliament for the Child Protection Minister, she's under major fire, but she lost all her rights over children in 2018. That was all handed over to Cathy Taylor, the Chief Executive of the DCP. So she actually doesn't have any rights over children, hadn't had to since 2018. So the fact that there's ministers now attacking her, it's just ridiculous. It's just it's like a show.
Yeah. She
certainly seems upset about it, but it's like a show.
Yeah.
But I think the more and more that comes out into the mainstream media, the more and more it's going to be made obvious. You know, we've got Senator Heffernan Anne Bressington. You know, these beautiful, amazing people went out there way before anybody else really spoke up, and put themselves out there and were ridiculed.
And nobody bats an eyelid in the mainstream, do they? You've got a former Prime Minister on this list of pedophiles.
Exactly.
Nobody. I mean, I shared that. I remember sharing that video of him in Parliament, like exposing this. Crickets.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But it is coming out. I mean, the people who put suppression orders on things like the Wood-Royal Commission and the Mulligan Inquiry, their names are there forever, and we know who suppressed those findings or those names. 922 perpetrators in South Australia that were never named, or that are suppressed for 80 years. And we know that John Howard and Michael Atkinson were the ones who signed off on that, and that will forever be besmirch their name.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Is there is there anything else you wanted to talk about? Because there is a big thing that I did want you to mention, but I don't know if you want to, about your father and his involvement with certain things. But is there anything that you wanted to add to your story or talk about before? Because I'm just conscious of the time. I don't want you to dwell on this, for too long. So,
well, I mean, my father was involved with high-profile missing children. So there is, it's. So what I would ask, I'm constantly being harassed that apparently the only way I can get any attention is to name these poor children. So I'm not going to name them, but I would ask people to Google Stansbury petition, and they'll find out what I'm talking about. Okay, so I've not used those children's names to promote myself.
No.
I have no desire to promote myself in this way. I could have a stellar career right now, but I can't because of all this crap that I'm having to drag along with me. So if you go to the Stansbury petition, please sign it. We already have 24,000 signatures on there.
Wow.
It's to dig a particular sinkhole on my father's former property where there are the remains of children. Not just 3, there's likely to be 6.
Can I mention that?
And there's other things.
Can I mention
other
that
things
years ago? Can I mention that years ago, I did a psychic reading for you, and I mentioned that.
Yes.
I did a kind of a remote view, and I said there's this hole, and there's.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I didn't remember at the time, but many years later, I recalled crawling through. When you have a sinkhole, there is a tunnel where the water goes out from the sinkhole to the ocean.
Yes.
Okay. And I was taken through a tunnel as a child, taken into a small cave, which was part of the sinkhole system, and saw a wall of skulls.
Yes.
So we're not just talking about.
That's what I saw.
Yeah.
Remember I said that.
And that's what you saw.
I said.
But at the time, that memory hadn't been unlocked. I didn't remember that until I think it was 2019.
Because I saw it back in 2008, 2009.
Yep.
Yeah. Can
I mention the prediction that you made about my father's demise?
Yes, because I can't remember. So tell me.
That's okay. So, I mean, this just blew my mind, darling. So you told me back in 2008, when I really wanted my father to die tomorrow, you told me back in 2008 that he would die at 88. And he died 2 weeks shy of his 89th birthday. You were within 2 weeks.
Whoa.
2 weeks shy of his 89th birthday in 2017. You were absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Absolutely spot on. I was so annoyed at the time. I didn't want to win that.
I remember
but you were right.
Because there was things that you asked me to tap into, and I'd pick up on them, but then I'd forget that I'd said it. And it was things that So and stuff about your brother, I think we were worried about.
And our mutual friend, she actually transcribed the reading that you gave me. I've still got that.
So I was just wanting to clarify, my best friend of like soul sister best friend is how I met you. I'm just going to put that up on the screen. I don't know if you can see that. Stansbury.
Yep, can see it. Okay. Thank you, darling.
So it looks like a mirror on my screen, but it will be back. It'll be the normal way around.
I can see it clearly.
But look that up, please, and sign that Stansbury petition, and you'll know what Rachel's talking about of the involvement in that her late father was involved in that situation. So is there more to this story that you want to add? Maybe we'll have to do another part. I just don't want you to be in the, to dwell on this really dark stuff for too long. I'm mindful of that. Okay, this is probably how we could wrap up. What would you say, because I've been approached by many SRA survivors, they're starting to get the courage to come out. They want to talk about it. Some of them are being suppressed because they've got current court proceedings. Some of them are worried about coming forward because they're actually still being gang stalked, which I think, does that stop around the age 35, I was told? When does the gang stalking stop?
That's a good question.
Because somebody told me that
I don't leave my house very often, so I don't get it. But okay.
Well, I mean, all of that sort of stuff. So if somebody wants to come forward, what would you suggest? Because sometimes I go, oh, do I give them your details to contact you? I don't want to overburden you with a lot of the trauma of hearing their stories, but I'm sort of like, these people need a safe place to go to, to be able to tell their stories or to move forward or to be able to be public without ridicule. What would you suggest?
Well, probably the best way that they can contact me, because I go on Facebook now and I'm overwhelmed by correspondence, and I just don't seem to be able to really catch up with it. So all the people that are sending me beautiful messages on Facebook, I'm so sorry that I have not got back to you. It's not that you're not important to me. I really appreciate that you're contacting me. If I answered all the correspondence, there would not be time in the day to shower and eat and do those things. And I'm sure you understand where I'm coming from there. So if they want to contact me by email is probably the best way, because I'm not getting so swamped on email at the moment. So rachel.vaughan73@gmail.com.
Yep.
So
all right.
that would be probably the best
details, way. But
thank you, darling.
For people who still don't know how to use YouTube. And they don't
description box.
They don't know where, and they email me personally to find out. Well, anyway, this is this is Rachel's. Oops, there we go. Rachel's email. Rachel.Vaughan VAUGHAN 73, right? At gmail.com. So I memorized it.
Thank you so much. Thanks, darling.
So they can so legitimate SRA survivors, we don't want people just bombarding you with questions and things like that. But if you are really ready to sort of deal with it or come forward or what have you, I would, Rachel is someone to trust. I'll say that 100%. So, okay, one last question.
Go for it.
From the SRA survivors that I have spoken to, when I tap into them psychically, I just see this and we're talking metaphysically. So if you don't believe in metaphysical stuff, you don't believe this is a multidimensional reality, then you just discard this thing that I'm saying. But when I tap into them on a metaphysical level beyond this 3D body, they always seem to have this incredible bright light within them, and that they are either extremely psychic or a very important soul that has incarnated. And so I kind of want to know what your theory is around that. Do these demons, I kind of had a theory that they seem to hone in on these children, whether or not they become satanic ritual abuse survivors or even just abused, okay? It's almost as if whatever demonic force is working through the perpetrator, they hone in on that particular aspect of the child. And so what is the theory around that?
Look, I believe, so every human has a soul. And every soul has a hue and a resonance and a vibration. Some souls have a higher frequency than others. The higher the frequency, the more energy can be harnessed. Now, I also believe that we choose our parents, because I believe in reincarnation. I believe that we reincarnate back into the same family line generally, and we choose our parents. So I had to come to that realization in 2012. It was a difficult one. And I'm not denigrating my mother. I love my mother. I just don't have a lot to do with her because she's still involved with some members of the cult, because she doesn't believe that they are part of it. And I don't want my information being passed on. So I love my mother. but I chose my father as a soul for a reason, so that I could do this work now. So that's my belief system. And as soon as I realised that I had been very, very, very physically unwell, it lifted. It took a while, but it lifted. So yeah, it was big. I think it was 2012. It might have been slightly earlier than that, but it was amazing.
I remember your physical things that were going on, and I'm really glad.
Yeah.
Chronic
reverse polarity. And I didn't have a sex addiction, but I was extremely unwell. And I read that somewhere, and it was like, oh my God, I finally know. I understand why I'm so sick.
Yeah.
And I think also it was Kuru symptoms coming through, because I had been experimented with it. So part of the healing, because I could barely walk at one point, shaking.
A bit like Hillary, hey? A bit like Hillary.
I got so skinny. Yeah. I looked like Michael Jackson for a while there. So I think whatever these metaphysical beings are, or whatever you might want to call these things, they can pick up on the soul. They know the importance of the soul, and so they'll attack those particular survivors or those particular souls. So yeah, you're right. Those who survive, I think also they have protection around them. You know, I had faith from a very early age. I knew I did not want to take on my father's faith. He was a Satanist. I did not want to do that. I did not like what he did. I wanted to be the absolute polar opposite. Somehow I knew about God and Jesus when I was a toddler. And I didn't have any kind of religious instruction about God and Jesus, except maybe what I might have seen on the television. I prayed from as long as some of my first memories were praying. And there were times in very, very dark places, because my father would incarcerate me in the tunnels. There were smaller tunnels that attached to the larger tunnels, and he would shove me in there and block it off so I couldn't get out. It was pitch dark. And I had experiences which, you know, it's not unusual to hallucinate in those circumstances. So I'm just going to put that out there for people who don't believe this sort of thing. But I had light come into those tunnels. And I believe it came from angels, I believe. And I was very small. You know, I had to be very small to fit into these tunnels. Yeah. These are the smaller tunnels, are only about this diameter, that light came in. So, you know, I believe, whether I was hallucinating or not, and it was warm, because it was freezing cold in those tunnels, absolutely freezing cold. I don't know, but for me, that was the belief that I needed to have, that I was being protected. Yeah. Yeah.
Starting to get interference.
So it was a full body experience.
We're starting to get interference on.
What was that, darling?
Starting to get interference on the Zoom.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You and I, we've been calling for the last couple of days, and how many times has our phone calls been interfered with?
And it's usually when there's a really interesting topic that comes up.
No, I was just going to say that Fiona Barnett's testimony, in one of them, she talks about being a child, meeting the children under the tunnel, and the children say, "We're waiting for the light man." The light man comes.
Oh God, I just got shivers.
And then Fiona said to the kids, "I know who you're talking about. That's Jesus." And she said, they say he comes with the light. He comes with the light for us.
Okay, thanks, Ellen. Needed to hear that.
So I remember Fiona talking about that. Wow. So do you think that the world will recover when they know about the extent of all of this?
Yes. And the recovery will be with knowledge.
Yeah.
So that it can never happen again. I mean, we've had experiences in the past, in memorable, like in history that is in memory, that have been utterly horrific. It won't happen this time. I mean, we're already losing people in nursing homes, as you know, but it's not going to be on the same scale. And people are soon going to realise, look, a lot of people already realise that there are therapeutics that we don't need to be frightened. There are therapeutics available. They're being sent out en masse in India at the moment. We don't need to take experimental medical treatments when there are therapeutics available. So this has just been the most massive enlightenment awakening period. And as you know, that shift, that 21st of December shift that occurred, this vibration that we're in at the moment is, we can't go back. We cannot go back. No, as much as the power structures desperately want us to forget, we can't. It's not possible. We're connected into something different now. It's a different energy. It's a different system, different grid, different knowledge system, different connection, and we are all connected.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for coming on and talking. I wish I could keep talking to you, but I'm very wary of the burden, you know, that it has on you and the toll. But if people want to contact you again, so I'll put it up on the camera again. So first of all, if you want to know more about what we were talking about that we couldn't say sort of on air, if you go to Stansbury Petition, and if you want to get in touch with Rachel, there's her email address, rachel.vaughan73@gmail.com. And
thank you, darling.
I hope we haven't said too many trigger words for YouTube to ban me. But that's all right. I'm going to do it. I'm just going to take the risk and put it up. So it's all good. But I love you so much, and I'm thank you.
Love you too, darling.
Thank you so
much.
And you know what? We were meant to. I remember you, and you reminded me of this yesterday. Years ago, you said to me, "You're going to become really famous," and I went,
"Yeah."
And you said you were going to come into prominence as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So now we need our third friend to do the same.
We just need my best friend. She won't come on. I keep asking her, come on.
She will. She will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll eventually get her on the show. So yeah, this is the time. So it's important that we came together and we spoke about this publicly, and that we have the people willing to know about this and to share this information. So thank you so much, Rachel. And I'm just honestly absolute honor to have you here. And thank you for sharing your story and being so brave.
Thank you, beautiful. Thank you so much.
I love you. I'm going to stop recording now. Thank you.